All right, everybody, welcome to episode 45 of the Fantasy Timeline, a proud member of the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network. I'm Josh at Real Fantasy TL, and I'm here with my main man, Bill at. Whoa, what is this? A new handle, Bill?
Oh, hold on. Don't. I'm out of here. That's another venture of mine. So I'll be.
Bill signed in under the wrong account, but I am here with my main man, Bill at Super Duper Flex. I would normally ask Bill how he's doing, but he's zipping out and zipping in under his other account. Here he comes. Here we go. Bill at Super Duper Flex. Bill, how you doing today, brother?
Doing well. Just happy we have something to talk about this week, huh? Some things actually happened.
Week 1 is in the books. There were highs, there were lows. It was just good to have football back, man. I mean, as fans of two teams that unfortunately did not get a win in week 1, it was still just a lot of fun to have football back, watch games, follow our fantasy teams, the guys on them, be excited about our wins and, a little bit miserable about the losses. So it was fun. And I think Bill, you feel the same way as well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So we're gonna get right to it. We're gonna get to the news. I could talk about all the news, but then we would probably use up our hour or hour and a half and not talk about anything that happened on Twitter. So I'm just gonna hit the highlights here. So first thing on the list, Marlon Mack will miss the season with a torn Achilles. I feel for him. I mean, Marlon Mack was going to be the starter at least until Jonathan Taylor got into his own and really took over that backfield. But unfortunately, now it's Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines, who had an amazing game on Sunday, even before the Marlon Mack injury. So, Bill, what does this do for any of your Marlon Mack shares, your Jonathan Taylor shares, your Nyheim Hines shares?
Well, it really sucks for Marlon Mack because this is his last year on his contract, I believe. So, I mean, he's going to have to go into the year, signing some low dollar deal, if any deal. So it kind of hurts him just because of that. Nyheim Hines and Jonathan Taylor, I mean, there's a ton of targets for those guys. I think I heard that that Rivers targeted the running backs like 44% of his passes, which is just incredible. So, I mean, it's obviously a Rivers trait, right? Like, you could always say, well, maybe that was the offense in San Diego / Los Angeles, but I think we can safely say that it's just a trait of Rivers that he likes to dump it off to the running backs. So, I mean, that increases the value of both of those guys, because they're both going to get targets. And then, I mean, it just opens everything up for Jonathan Taylor. He could essentially turn into like a, I don't know, almost like a bell cow, but, probably like the Gordon, like a supercharged Melvin Gordon and a Eckler light would be the offense, I guess. So I would give some more to Jonathan Taylor, take a little off of Nyheim Hines compared to Eckler, but they're both attractive to add to your roster for sure. I mean, Hines, you should be able to get on waivers in a lot of leagues. I think he was available in at least, 25 to 35% of my leagues. And those are deeper leagues. So, I mean, he's a guy that, I mean, he could be the hit, right? Like, he could be the guy that week 1 hit that somebody adds him to their team, and that's a game changer.
Yeah.
And, I mean, anybody who's Jonathan Taylor luck boxed into a ton of touches. So, I mean, the whole situation kind of just cleared up. And, when you have those, like, ambiguous backfields, It's just like, man, when is this going to happen, or who's going to get the touches? But I think the roles just were provided, right? So there's no doubt as to like who's getting the touches now.
Absolutely. And if you look at the pass games for the running backs, Naheem Hines and Jonathan Taylor combined for 14 receptions, 112 yards, and a touchdown in a loss. So if that offense can really get clicking, Paris Campbell also looked good in that game as well. Those numbers could even increase. I agree with you. Jonathan Taylor is now kind of the super stud that we expected him to be at some point during the season. That's all just been fast tracked due to the Mac injury. Naheem Hines, like you said, if you saw him on the waiver wire, I hope that you tried to grab him. I hope that you bid enough fab on him.
Right.
I mean, I probably would have went probably 30 to 35% of my fab to grab him. And I'm sure in some leagues that wouldn't have been enough. But that's I probably would have been, in my opinion, aggressive in that 30 to 35% range to try to snag him. But I think that it's gonna be bigger and better things for both guys, and it's gonna be fun if you have one or both of them on your squad this year. So we go from Indy to the Big D to Dallas. Blake Jarwin tore his ACL, non-contact injury. That was the Sunday night game, so I'm sure a lot of people were watching that and kind of saw it happen live. He just went to make a cut and just collapsed. It's a shame. A lot of people were predicting a breakout for Blake Jarwin. I wasn't on the breakout train just because I thought he was probably going to be the fourth option in that offense. But now we'll never know. It's unfortunate for him. He's going to be out for the season. And I guess it's Dalton Schultz season. I mean, I don't know if that's anyone you're really even looking to grab unless you're in a super deep league. But we'll see. I mean, there's been rumors that Dallas is going to call Delaney Walker. I don't know if there are any other Delaney Walker-ish type tight ends still kind of roaming free agency. But what do you think about this as it concerns the Dallas offense? Are you worried about it? Are you kind of just like, Dalton Schultz will be okay? What are you thinking?
Well, it's always nice to have a weapon or somebody that you feel good about being a little dynamic. Dalton Schultz and Blake Jarwin 2 years ago, I think people were pretty similar. Like they were, they didn't really value one much over the other. So, I mean, maybe Dalton Schultz shows something when he has the opportunity. I think he's an adequate tight end. I'm not sure he's going to be quite as, I guess, dynamic, but it really doesn't matter. He's the fifth in the pecking order regardless, right? So, like, I don't know how many targets he got before he got hurt, but I mean, I don't think it was that much, and I don't think he was going to get a ton per game. So, I mean, what do you think? Like 3 or 4 a game would have been expected of him because that's 60 some targets for the year. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just one of those things where, it sucks for him. I mean, maybe when you were talking about like those old tight ends, maybe Vernon Davis gets a call. I mean, he seems to be always in shape, so he could be a guy that gets thrown in there, just as a little bit more of a receiving tight end. So, grand scheme, I don't think it changes much for Dallas. It's just the Blake Jarwin, owner or, teams that had him on their roster. I did add Dalton Schultz in I think it's a 1.75 tight end premium. So, it's just like the last roster spot just to see what happens. But yeah, he's not a guy I'm adding in like a non-tight end premium or a shallower roster.
Yeah, I agree with you on all that. I think that Dalton Schultz is going to be used kind of the way that Jason Witten was used last year. I mean, obviously, even Jason Witten being 900 years old, Dalton Schultz is not as talented as Witten, but I think it's going to be that, hey, we need 5 yards on a 3rd and 5. Get out in the middle 6 yards away and catch this ball that we're going to have set up for you, because we're going to have Gallup and Cooper and Lamb just running wild, and Dallas is crazy enough to still try to run it on 3rd and 5 as well. So it'll be interesting. I agree with you. You weren't expecting much of him before Jarwin. You're probably still not expecting a whole ton. So that's that. Two guys on Saturday, the day before all the Sunday games started, got their extensions. Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook are both locked up. I believe they both signed 4-year extensions, so they're going to be there 4 more years. And I think it's interesting to tie it kind of back to the Marlon Mack injury and hitting free agency. To steal a term from soccer, the group of death, that running back class that was supposed to come out and be, Alvin Kamara and Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook and Aaron Jones and, all of these just heavy hitters are now slowly getting signed to these extensions. Joe Mixon was signed a few weeks ago. Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara are now signed. So I think the headline right now is Aaron Jones, unless he's next on the list to get signed to an extension. So it may be a little bit more comfortable for the 2nd and 3rd tier running backs that were going to be free agents. And I mean, good for all these guys getting their money, especially running backs, because it's so hard for them to get their money in the first place. So good on those guys. I'm happy for all of them. Bill, I don't know if you have any commentary to add.
Yeah, I mean it's great for them. It's something that if I have any of those guys on my team, I'm actually happy, because I know they're going to be still in the same situation that they're in now, and that's where they've succeeded. The one thing that, if you're just going to question like the signing, I mean, signing Dalvin before he's shown that he can stay healthy, that's pretty big risk on their part. I know they got a little bit of a discount compared to some of the other guys, but that it's an interesting one. But I'm sure that the way the contract's set up, it'll be an easy out if they need to bounce from it. But I mean, all of those guys have at least shown something and of elite performance. So I get it. And when you get somebody like that, I mean, it's kind of hard to get rid of them, just because they fit with your system, that they understand the offense. You bring somebody else in, maybe they don't fit quite as well. There's just, so I get the team's paying for them, and there's always outs in these contracts for the team. So get your money when you can, because you could end up being Devonta Freeman real quick. So,
and I also think that both of these teams are two teams that are trying to push all their chips into the middle and trying to win one, knowing, both of those teams have limited windows. In New Orleans' case, what does Breeze have? 1 year left. This is the year. Maybe he, stretches one more year out of it. Minnesota, they have a lot on offense. That defense, obviously, based on what happened week 1, is suspect to say the least. But they're trying to shove as much money into the offense as possible to see if they can kind of almost Kansas City Chief it to a Super Bowl. So, I get it in both cases. I think they're trying to win the big one, and if they got to spend a little extra money to do it, they're going to try to go ahead and do it. So those are the highlights of the news. Obviously, there's a lot more that we could talk about, but again, we don't want to spend the entire hour and a half talking about news. So we're going to go to our favorite part. We're going to go to the things that we saw on the timeline. And the first thing we saw on the timeline is from Shane. At Shane is the worst. That's our boy Shane Manila. Super good dude. If somehow you're listening to us and you don't follow him, correct that, because not only is he hilarious, but he is super smart when it comes to this game. He's always dropping knowledge bombs like this one. Bet you didn't know that Joe Burrow has an underrated, underdiscussed, unknown hidden rushing ability. It's a secret according to every fantasy article that I've read that mentions him. Ever. Every time. So Bill asked him if we could use this verbatim. He said yes, so I read it verbatim. And we were talking about this before we went live, and this isn't so much a commentary on Joe Burrow and whether he can run or he can't run, even though he had 46 yards and a touchdown in week 1 in the rush game. But this is more of a watch out for the narrative tweet. I mean, we hear these narratives all year round. Especially if you're playing Dynasty, you're hearing about Joe Burrow, the electric arm. He could do this. Look at the season he just produced at LSU. You hear, throw. And, we were talking, we had this example. Jonathan Taylor can't catch. Everybody who talked about Jonathan Taylor, almost everybody talked about Jonathan Taylor. You can't catch. They tried to ramp him up, his last year at Wisconsin. They gave him, I think he had like 27 receptions or something like that. But before that, he was a non-factor in the passing game. He can't catch. Well, what happens? Week 1, he has 6 receptions, I think 60-something yards or something like that. And Jonathan Taylor can catch. How come no one told us about this? Well, I mean, if you're just listening to the echo chamber, yeah, you're going to hear that he can't catch. Same thing with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's going to be electric in the pass game. I don't know how he's going to do between the tackles, but he's going to be electric in the pass game. And then, what does he do? He goes out, has no catches, and 138 yards on the ground, I think. So, I mean, really, like, when you're looking at these guys, really break it down. Just don't listen to what you hear, every analyst say, because there is a lot of that echo chamber in fantasy football.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of it is just scheme dependent. It depends on, how offenses are going to utilize the players. I also think that, sometimes when people say that somebody's a good pass catcher out of the backfield, but somebody else isn't, it doesn't mean that they can't catch. It just means that they're not an elite level route runner and have great hands. So, I mean, if you're at that level, you can catch a football. I mean, give me a break. You know what I mean? So like that's part of the, think for yourself a little bit when it comes to that kind of stuff. Every guy out there can catch. I mean, Leonard Fournette, that was a huge thing on him. And then look what he did. I mean, he got targets. He caught the ball. I mean, maybe he doesn't catch at quite as high a percentage as somebody else, but he's still capable. And, it's just a matter of how they utilize them. I mean, Taylor has a quarterback now that wants to dump off. Of course he can catch those. So the thing with Burrow, it's kind of interesting because everybody, that Shane's talking about his rushing and how it's underrated and all that, I think that goes hand in hand. A lot of people just, everybody compared this year, they compared Tua to Burrow. I mean, those are the guys the quarterbacks that they compare. And everybody has this bias as to who's capable of running and who isn't. And, there was a narrative going along the whole time about Tua being a good runner. And then that you never heard that about Burrow. And, heard that all, off season or draft season. And it's like, all right, dude, you might want to look at, his per game, rushing stats. And, it's just people get that in their mind and they can't get it out. And, it's just it's a bias. So there are a lot of things, but the fact that everybody says it's underrated, I think it's underrated in comparison to Tua, but as a whole, of course, if everybody's saying it's underrated, it's not underrated, right? But I mean, but you don't, there was a lot of people spit. I mean, the analysts, it wasn't it, but there was a lot of people on Twitter spitting that, that they didn't bring up his rushing ability. So it's just one of those things where you kind of got to fish where you're getting your information and make sure that, it's somebody and fact checked. I mean, that's a huge part of it. And don't just accept everything they say. But if somebody, like if Josh and I say something, we might think we're saying what we, the correct information. But I'm like, anytime I hear something that kind of changes my mind or surprises me, I'm going to go look it up to make sure that information is correct. So that would be long story long, just, check it out yourself before you accept it as a truth.
Yeah, and you had a lot of good tidbits there. Look at where you're getting your information from and fact check. I mean, we all have access to the internet. Pro Football Reference is a really good site, just something free if you want to go check some stats. And, you can usually find out a lot by just, as I call it, kind of just doing a very shallow dive into the stats. You can usually find out a lot of things that you didn't even know. It doesn't have to be complicated and complex. Just look at some game logs, look at an end of season total, and kind of put it together for yourself. So one thing I do want to get into, though. Oh, no, go ahead, Bill. Go ahead.
No, this just popped in my head, and this is back to the Jarwin thing. I think a better ad, and actually Steve D, who is in our chat, in our FTC, which, by the way, if you want to be in our podcast chat, I mean, it's my most active chat by far, and a bunch of good people, international. We have people from many countries, and it's just a good group. And anyway, Steve joined one of my leagues, took over for somebody who had to bounce right before the season started, and he did a pickup of Ross Dwelley, and that was a brilliant pickup. And hey, Steve, I stole that idea and I went through everywhere I could and grabbed him, especially if in premium. I would much rather have Ross Dwelley right now because we've seen him perform at a high level, and if Kittle ends up having to sit out, Dwelley can perform. I mean, of course, you still have Jordan Reed there to potentially, buffer that a little bit or, pare it down a little bit, but we'll see. And I mean, so Dwelley's a good ad, and he's a very easy drop if you have to. It's not like, well, let's see what happens in the next few weeks. If he's going to be playing or not. So that was a really good call by him, and that's somebody that maybe I would consider adding over Dalton Schultz.
And I'm going to bow down to you guys right now. It's not even a guy that I thought about. I should have, knowing the Kittle situation, but honestly, it didn't even pop into my head. So I give you guys all the credit for.
Oh, it was all him.
Our man FF Swirly. He was going next level where, and you know what? It's crazy. Sometimes those little moves that you don't think are going to amount to anything, if George Kittle ends up, let's say missing 3 weeks and not one for whatever reason, and Ross Dwelley does what he's done in the past, this isn't even like, well, he's like super athletic. He might be good. He has performed at an NFL level before. That might be a move that is kind of a stopgap that helps you stay afloat for 3 weeks. That's real next level. I give you guys, I could try to search now, but they're probably taken. Bill's in a few leagues with me, so I'm sure.
Well, yeah, he's taken in our leagues for sure.
So Bill already got him, but yeah, all the leagues that I'm not in with Bill, I'm gonna just see if he's out there. That's a good one. That's awesome. And I do want to go off on a tangent here a little bit. We talked about both CEH and Jonathan Taylor. People with the week 1 victory laps, let's just stop it. Like, we don't know what's going on. Like, no, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not going to end the season with, 0 receptions and like 900 stops at the 1-yard line. Like, it's one game. Jonathan Taylor is probably not averaging 6 receptions a game. Like, it's probably not happening. Let's get a month into the season before we really start trying to make our victory laps. I joked around with JB. I said, the only exercise I take is when the only exercise I get is when I take my victory laps. But I mean, that was a joke. Come on, people. Like, just let's see how the season plays out before we start, crowning people as the next coming or saying people suck because they had a bad week 1.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a tough one this year, especially just because it's, this is essentially preseason game 1, right? So, I mean, there's just so much that's not been worked out chemistry-wise for teams. So maybe there's a weak spot in the defense that gives this person an opportunity to succeed that they played against. I mean, it's just one of those things that we don't really know the true strengths and abilities of these teams yet. And, good for them for being able to, do well. And I think that the part that the ones that I am maybe a little more excited about are like, and obviously I don't really go around and, victory lap, but the guys that I'm picking to say, okay, I think he's going to get more playing time or I think, he's going to win this role. Those are the kind of things that I'm happy about. I'm not going out and saying, hey, look at me. But, like Josh Kelly, I grabbed a lot of Josh Kelly. I didn't grab much Justin Jackson. I mean, and he fell into a role. So I'm really happy about that. It's like, but it very well could have been me dumping him this week. You know what I mean? So,
for sure.
But so those are the ones I'm happy about. But it's more about like, oh, okay, Justin Gage, like he's definitely their third receiver. It's like those are the kind of things that make me happy. And he was free all off season. So it's just one of those things that those are the things that I'm excited about. Like, I think, and probably this makes me a terrible fantasy football podcaster. And I say this every week, but like, I'm very rarely gonna like plant my flag on a particular player. I'm very much gonna grab guys I think are in good situations. I don't know if they're good. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I can't tell you if CEH is better than Jonathan Taylor, but I like Jonathan Taylor running behind that offensive line. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of like where I am. I'm not saying that one's better than the other. So rarely am I gonna be able to like, I guess, victory lap because I don't necessarily think I'm not saying this guy's better than that guy. You know what I mean? So like the only time I ever do that is when I do my the rookie digest. And so that's the only time where I'm like, hey, I got that right, or oh man, I blew that. But yeah, victory laps are kind of, I mean, it's fun, you're excited, I get it, and that's great. Going out and I told you soing is a little bit different because, that's like true victory lapping. And I mean, you better check yourself because it could be 2 weeks down the road and you're looking like a dolt. You know what I mean? You're just an idiot. So, let's wait a while and make sure that this everything's true because right now everything's so random on, these teams. So,
and I don't think necessarily not planting your flags on a bunch of guys makes you a bad podcaster.
Honestly, I'm never gonna stake my claim. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, I'm never gonna be like, go out and buy. Like, it's interesting because different podcasters, like, now that I'm on that other pod, I was sharing my shares, the amount of percentage of players I have, and I only have 5 or 6 players on more than 25% of my teams. You know what I mean? So it's so spread out on my teams, and there's only like 5 or 6 guys that I have on more than like, so I have 20 teams of Dynasty on more than 5 teams. So
Right.
where there's like one of the guys on the other pod showed me, he's got at least 10 guys with over 40% of his teams with guys. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Yeah.
he plants his flag on certain players because he believes that they're going to succeed. Where I'm a little bit more, I don't really know. So I'm going to take guys that I like their situation, but I'm not going to over, invest in individuals because there's just a lot of risk when you do that.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily I'm just not providing actionable content as much because that's the way I play. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I also think it's one of those things as well where with comparing how you feel about guys to how you have them on your team, just because you're playing in leagues, there's 11, 13, 15 other guys in a league with you. Just because you like a guy doesn't necessarily mean that there's not 3, 4, 5 other people that also like that guy and are maybe willing to, jump you in a draft to get him or outbid you on a trade to get him. So that's one thing. But, listen, I've staked my claim to a couple of guys. Listen,
let me victory lap for you, man.
What's up?
Quintez Cephas, man. Like, don't put your arms down. No victory laps. But holy shit, man. Like, he got, like, utilized. Like, that's the thing, right? Like, the fact that Stafford trusts him this quickly is a huge sign. And, I mean, that's awesome. Now, maybe it'll taper down a little bit, once Galladay comes back.
Of course, yeah.
But I mean, just the fact that he was like 10 targets or something.
10 targets, yeah.
Like, that's crazy. So, and he's the perfect type of wide receiver for Stafford because he doesn't have to get the separation. He's got good hands, that sort of thing. So, and Stafford will just kind of rip it in there. So, yeah, that was I'll do the victory lap for you. But
I appreciate that. I mean, obviously everyone knew Kenny Galladay was out. That, if you would have said to me before that game, hey, I bet you Quintez Cephas gets 10 targets, I would have been like, you have lost your mind.
Nobody would have. Like, if the Vegas line would have been like plus 10,000 for that, I'll be honest with you. Like,
and I wouldn't have dropped $1.
Yeah.
But nah, man, that was really cool. I did not expect that. But listen, I will now turn the table. I will also victory lap for you, and you briefly mentioned it, but I'm going to mention it a little bit more. Josh Kelly.
So this became a victory lap.
Oh yeah, well, we're not victory lapping. We're promoting someone else's take. We're not victory lapping our own take. Josh Kelly, you have been talking about Josh Kelly throughout the draft process, throughout the non-point scoring season, and that boy looked good. Like, I'm going to say it like that. That boy looked good. Like, he definitely has a role in that offense, and you can listen to all the coach speak that you want about, Austin Eckler is our guy, and yes, he's the guy, but Josh Kelly has a role. They just play
different roles, right? It's like he just took the Gordon role, essentially.
Exactly. He is in that Melvin Gordon role now. So, yeah, I mean, but the funny thing is neither one of us went on Twitter and said, look, I told you that these guys are going to be good after.
No, we're just recording it so hundreds of people can hear us say it.
Yeah, that's even better, actually. But we also know that, look, next week, Kenny Galladay plays, Marvin Jones is there, TJ Hawkinson, Quintez Cephas gets 2 targets,
Yeah, I mean,
maybe
sure.
maybe the game plan is totally different for the Chargers and Josh Kelly gets, 4 attempts. Like, we also know that is in the range of outcomes for those guys because they're both of these guys we're talking about are rookies.
Yep.
As well as they did, they still have not had a quote unquote real off season. So, or real preseason, excuse me. So, we'll see what happens, but it is nice on week 1 to see guys that we've been talking about since March, April, May, come out there and ball out and have
it's rewarding for sure. At least you're like, I'm not that bad at this game, at least, right?
I mean, I'm pretty bad, but I got one right, so I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna go with it. But this next one is one that was actually sent to the timeline handle. And remember, guys, we pull everything off of Twitter. But if you send us something and we like it, we're going to throw it on the show sheet. So this is from Jay Sutt at DFF Jay Sutt. He tweets a lot of stuff at us. This is a 12-team Superflex PPR redraft league. Which duo would you rather have? Cam Akers and Preston Williams, or DeAndre Swift and Hollywood Brown? So, Bill, I'm going to let you go first. Which side of that do you like?
Well, I mean, I'm a little biased, of course, and I'll be the first to admit it. But I mean, even if we say like that, I think we can say Swift and Akers cancel each other out pretty fairly. I mean, I think most people would prefer Swift over Akers, but let's just say they cancel each other out. So then it's down to Preston Williams or Hollywood Brown. And I'm just going to go with the high draft capital and the guy who was hurt all last year, still performed pretty well, when he played. And I mean, and the guy that is in an offense that's pretty incredible. And I think he's going to have a lot of one-on-ones, and that's Marquise Brown. So, that's just, to me, it's a pretty easy decision. I do love Preston Williams. I think if you can get him for a second-round pick in Dynasty, do it. I think that he's going to be long-term, wide receiver 3-ish, and that's definitely worth the second-round pick. So, but I do like pretty much everybody here, but Akers is just a guy that I'm a little hesitant to christen as a great running back. He's always struggled with. We've always used offensive lines as an excuse, so I just need to see it. You know what I mean? So I would definitely go the Swift Hollywood side.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. We were talking about Quintez Cephus and the trust between that kind of built right away between him and Stafford. But, and Bill, I don't mean to break your heart here, but Stafford did go to Swift to try to ice that game against
great
the Bears. And I mean, Swift dropped it, but Matt Stafford has that trust in Swift to say, this is a play to ice this game. We can win this game. He could have went to Marvin Jones. He could have went to Cephus. He could have went to Hawk, and he went to Swift. And I think that's important, even though, obviously the results weren't what they wanted, to be out there and say, wow, Matt Stafford is looking around the field and he trusts Swift enough to try to get him the ball to ice a game, I think is important.
Side note on that game and the comeback from Trubisky, the Lions lost their 3 top guys in the secondary. And if you look at his stat line before and after the last guy got hurt, that's when everything's flipped the switch. So that's part of it. But my point being is that Detroit's secondary is going to suck unless these guys come back. So that's a positive sign for the Detroit offense, in my opinion, for fantasy. So, if you're able to add some of these guys, Marvin Jones, maybe some of the cheaper guys, Cephus or Amendola, those are the kind of guys that, maybe they hit, especially for bye weeks and that sort of thing, that might be worth adding. So, but yeah, I'm happy with Swift so far. I mean, he's exactly who they hope he is. It's just a matter of him making that catch next time.
Well, and let's remember too, Swift did not go into that game at 100%.
Right.
So once he gets over the injury and he's at 100%, man, I mean, he looks like he is going to be legit. Hollywood went 5 for 101 in the first half, and they were bushwhacking the Browns, so they didn't even need to pass in the second half. But he shows that if you can give that guy a handful of targets, he can take it to the house on every single play. Our man Jerry O'Shea from the beautiful country of Ireland, he's also going with Swift and Hollywood by a lot. This trade, this poll actually ended up being 50-50. I think some of that has to do with the fact that Cam Akers did get a lot of usage in that game. I think he had 14 carries, if I'm correct about that. So he's looking like a guy that is going to take over that backfield sooner rather than later. I know Malcolm Brown is still there, and I think he's going to have a role. Darrell Henderson, I'm not quite sure what he's going to be. And, Preston Williams now is in a situation where Devontae Parker is hurt. There's not a lot of other weapons unless you're going to count the emergence of Myles Gaskin. So I can kind of see it from the other side, but in my opinion, if I was going to get the Swift Hollywood side, I would smash that in a second. Our man FF Swirly, Lamar looks like he's on a mission. Does Hollywood get much more consistent volume this season? I mean, I'll let you go first, Bill. I have some thoughts about this, but I'll let you go first.
I mean, I think so. I think that he's their number one target, in my opinion, I don't necessarily know he's going to get a ton of volume, but it's going to be quality volume. You know what I mean? It's going to be deeper routes and that sort of thing. Like, we've been high on Hollywood all off season. So it's like, this is just what happened this week is kind of like, what we were hoping would happen. And I can see him easily getting, in that 5 to 8 targets a week. And what's 8 targets times 16, that's like 130 targets a year.
A lot.
So, that's pretty solid. And that's a number one, that's the targets of a number one wide receiver. So, I think he is going to get the volume. At least more than what we saw last year, especially because he's healthy.
Yeah, and he is the number one wide receiver on an explosive offense. Let's face it. Mark Andrews, I think, is the number one passing option on that team, but Hollywood is going to do some things. They can run you to death with Lamar and Ingram, and now looks like J.K. Dobbins can, teleport himself into the end zone whenever the hell he feels like it. So, when you load up to try to stop the run, Hollywood can burn you deep, and he can burn you deep easily.
Yeah, it's all the levels are taken care of, man. They got the short, you get intermediate, and the deep taken care of now. It's gonna, plus you got a running back that just draws everybody in. So it's just like, it's such a cheat, you know what I mean? Because load
the box.
This
Hollywood.
Offense is gonna be so fun to watch all year long.
Yeah, load the box. Hollywood can take you deep. If you're gonna put 6 or even 7 in the secondary, all right, Andrews can eat you up over the middle. The running backs can
Ingram,
gash you. Lamar Jackson can take it and go 30 yards in a blink of an eye.
They could just run an RPO the whole game, right? And
who's stopping them?
And they would be a top 10 offense if they said this is what we're gonna do every time.
Yeah,
they would still be a top 10 offense. It's just, but then when you can start running all the other plays, this Man, this is just gonna be so fun over the next decade between Kansas City and them.
Man,
I wish they were on other opposite like conferences. You know what I mean? Just for
see,
the
two or
we'd
three
probably
of
see
those.
that Super Bowl every other year if it was,
Yeah.
you know.
So yeah, Swirly. I think that's where he's gonna be. He's gonna be in that reception range, and he doesn't need much more than that because he's so electric. So I hope that helped answer your question, and I hope you like what you heard. This next one here is from the Dynasty Pollster at Dynasty Polsty. That's Polster without the R, and then just put a number 1 at the end of it. Which side would you rather have? DeAndre Hopkins, a 2022 third, and Malcolm Brown, or Amari Cooper and a 2023 first? Bill, I'll let you start.
I mean, okay, like let's take off the 2022 third and the Malcolm Brown part, and then let's just say DeAndre Hopkins and Amari and a 23 first. So that's literally 3 drafts from now. Like, give me a break. Like, I mean, this is so obvious, the answer here. Like, I mean, you could put those other 2 pieces on the Amari side, and it still wouldn't be fair, in my opinion. So, I mean, yeah. Like, I mean, I like that Amari got a bunch of targets. You know, they were in the situation where, you know, they were going to throw the ball a little bit more. But yeah, I just don't like, I mean, I think there is a distinct top 3 wide receivers in the NFL, and Hopkins is one of them. So I am more than willing to pay all that other stuff plus more to get Hopkins.
Yeah, and as the resident Dallas Cowboys fan, I am going to take the DeAndre Hopkins side.
But if I have any Amari Cooper, I am going to try to make a trade like this.
Hey, why not? I will, you know, we talked about victory lapping, but we also have to take credit for the things that we said that maybe didn't work out as well. I did not believe that DeAndre Hopkins was going to integrate himself into the offense so quickly. He proved me wrong. He laughed in my face and just destroyed the San Francisco 49ers. He took their soul and kept it for himself.
He is just so awesome, man.
Dude, and it's amazing when you look at what the Arizona Cardinals offense looked like with DeAndre Hopkins, and then you compared that to what the Houston Texans offense looked like without DeAndre Hopkins. It was like, he is that dude. And I was completely wrong. I thought it was going to take him some time to integrate. I didn't know if, you know, Christian Kirk, who was invisible in that game, and Larry Fitzgerald would take targets. You know, is DeAndre Hopkins just a target hog because he's always been the far and away number 1 guy on his team? He proved that he is far and away the number 1 guy on 95 to 98% of NFL teams. So, yeah, it's easy. Take DeAndre. Hell, grab yourself that Malcolm Brown and try to ship him off for a first or a second right now to somebody who thinks that, you know, Malcolm Brown is going to be a thing, and kind of even increase this trade even more in your favor. Because I mean, this is crazy. And you know, public service announcement. Listen, draft picks, commissioners, this year's draft and next year's draft. That's it. 2023,
2 years in advance. That's it.
In 2023, like, my son might be playing in the NFL. Like, gee, like, that's so far away. And obviously, I'm being hyperbolic. My son's only 6, but like,
hey, who knows?
2023, like, we can't even talk about one guy right now that's going to be eligible for the 2023 draft with a shred of confidence. Like, we could talk about some freshmen that are, oh yeah, they're going to be good in 2023. We have no freaking idea. Like,
No.
come on, like, stop. Do this year's draft and the following year's draft. Leave it at that. 2023, yep. Like, my goodness. That's just my public service announcement about that. So we got this next one here from Jaded Turner at Jaded for Fantasy. Cool name. This is a PPR Superflex. So on one side, we got Russ, we got Russell Wilson, Dalvin Cook, and Mark Ingram. On the other side, we have Patrick Mahomes and Zach Ertz. So I'll take this one first. Normally, I am in the super flex. Hey, give me that Patrick Mahomes. I'm going to take it to the bank and, be good. But man, you're giving me Dalvin Cook as well. And we talked about Dalvin earlier. He hasn't proven he can stay healthy. But damn, that dude puts up points every time he's on the field. I mean, week 1 is my exhibit A on what Dalvin Cook can do when he's healthy and he's on the field. So I think that leans it more. I think that pulls it more over to the Russell Wilson side. Mark Ingram, yeah, this might be the last year of fantasy relevance for him. And I mean, the way J.K. Dobbins is playing, it might not even be that long. But Zach Ertz, I mean, he wasn't heavily targeted in the week 1 game, and now there's talk about him arguing with Harry Roseman about getting extended, and he may not even be in Philly next year. So, if he ends up somewhere else that is, he ends up on an inferior team or on a team that doesn't throw to the tight end as much, he may have lost all value. So I'm going with Russ. I'm going with Dalvin. I'm going with Ingram. Who do you got here, Bill?
So I probably agree with your logic, but my heart just says get the best player, and that's kind of where I'm at. Dalvin's a guy I've always had a hard time investing in Dalvin, and I don't know if it's a take lock thing. I don't know if it's just like I don't want to put that much value in somebody that I know 2 years from now could be worthless kind of thing. And I get it. There's other opportunities to potentially move him, but I mean, there's a lot of people that probably have the same mindset I am. So he's going to be a harder player to move off of your roster. So I just rather get the guy who's like 24 years old or whatever, and I know he is just going to be one of the top 5 quarterbacks every year for the next decade. And so that's what I would do. I would take Mahomes. But Russ is just, I think that's a losing bet for 2020 for sure. I mean, if I'm contending, I have to go the Dalvin side. I mean, if it's just in a vacuum, I'm taking the Mahomes side.
But Bill, they're letting Russ cook, man. Week 1,
they are letting Russ cook.
Russ is cooking, man.
I'm excited to watch. There's so much I'm excited for. It's just if they just let it fly, man. Their defense isn't good enough for them not to let it fly, right? So, that's the interesting thing. And
the funniest thing, one of the funniest things about 2020 is in any other year, Mr. Unlimited letting Russ cook would be one of the strangest things that we've seen in any other year.
Yeah.
And this year, it doesn't even hit the top 10. We're just like, oh, they're letting Russ cook, and he's Mr. Unlimited, and okay.
But
cool.
This is the same point about the victory laps. I mean, we still got to wait and see, right? This is week 1. It could have just been a matchup thing. And so we still have to, we've seen this before where Russ has 4 games a year where he's just destroys a team, and then he's average, he's QB 10 to 15 the rest of the season. So
Yep.
We just have to see it, and but I so hope that he just gets unleashed every game.
And that's why I brought it up a little facetiously, the let Russ cook, because
Right.
there were a lot of people on Twitter, I didn't letting Russ cook, and I'm like, first of all, that Atlanta defense is not going to be in the top 5 this year, most likely. So I think a lot of teams are going to let their quarterback cook. Again, I mean, the Cowboys play Atlanta next week. Dak Prescott might be cooking too. I think a lot of QBs are going to cook against that defense. So
yeah.
Let's not, like you said, let's not just claim that to be what Russell Wilson's season is going to be until we get a little bit deeper into it. And our boy again, Jerry Shea FF, with the Seahawks will be losing heavily against the Patriots Sunday. So Russ will cook, and he's got a couple of the laughing, crying emojis there. I don't think they will be losing heavily, but hey, he might be cooking anyway. So who knows? I mean,
yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. Cam Newton got more rushing attempts against the Dolphins than he had against any other team in any single game in his career. So who knows? Maybe the Patriots are up 2 touchdowns because Cam rushed 10 times for 100 yards and a couple of touchdowns. It was a crazy week 1. Anything can happen. So we got one more on here. It's a good one. Oh, and by the way, Bill, it's cool that we were split on it because the Twitter poll was pretty much split on it as well. 54% for the Russ side and 46% for the Mahomes side. So I think it shows, though, the type of deal you do have to put together to try to get Patrick Mahomes off of somebody. I mean, you have to bring in I think the top elite tier of quarterbacks is Mahomes and Lamar. And then you have to bring in a very high level off of that second tier, and then add a very higher end running back like Dalvin Cook, and even just to get the talks going, that may not necessarily even get the trade done, and then there's obviously the Mark Ingram and the Zach Ertz. I just want to bring that up for people who, try to get high value targets and get frustrated. Why? I mean, you got to give up something to get something. So there's that. So there's this last one here from Boybica. I hope I said that right. At BenFat1. This is a 10-team standard league. Aaron Jones, or again, we got Mark Ingram 2 in a row. Mark Ingram and Le'Veon Bell. Who do you got? This was before the Bell injury.
Yeah.
So I don't want it. I don't want to make Boybica sound like they're trying to hustle somebody. But this was a poll that did go up before the Bell injury. So who do you got?
Yeah, I mean that's pretty easy now, right? Bell's hurt. Ingram's old. I mean, I'm taking Aaron Jones, and I probably would.
Hard before.
I'd probably take an Aaron Jones regardless. Like even beforehand. I mean, Bell. I mean, as much as I like Bell, I mean he's played for my alma mater. It's I root for him, but I'm not adding him to teams just based on the mess that the Jets are. And I mean, I'm not going out of my way to add Mark Ingram on any of my teams because I just don't feel like he's going to be helping me once we get to the playoffs. So like, I just think that he's going to lose a lot of his volume by then. So that automatically gives me Aaron Jones as the answer. And I think it would have been fairly easy even before this week.
Yeah. And Bill, my stance on Aaron Jones. I think the season he had last year, hype them up a little bit. I am not an Aaron Jones believer, but even in this case, man, I think it's Aaron Jones. I don't think it was close before what we saw in week one. It sure as hell isn't close now. Even if you would give Dobbins 2 touchdowns to Ingram and Lev Bell was healthy, I still think it's Aaron Jones. You know, we've seen the potential of Aaron Jones. I mean, I personally may not be a believer, but that doesn't mean that what he did last year did not happen. It happened. Yes, they did draft AJ Dillon in the second round. They still do have Jamal Williams, but he showed himself as a RB1 last year and showed that he has the ability to do it. Mark Ingram, I don't think we're seeing any RB1 seasons out of him anymore. Unfortunately for Lev Bell, even before the injury, being on the Jets and how dysfunctional they are, I don't know if we're seeing any RB1 seasons out of him anymore, So, that's my stance on that. I think it's Aaron Jones. I think it's pretty easy. But again, this was pretty much a 60-40 trade poll. So again, while the Aaron Jones side won, it wasn't a blowout. So it's one of those things, and I think, obviously there are a lot of flaws with Twitter polls when you put up trades and stuff like that. But I also think they can be helpful. Hell, if you are an Aaron Jones truther, if you're a supporter and you say 60-40, so maybe I can give 2 meh running backs and maybe throw in a second. If you're a truther, throw in a first and 2 middling running backs and see, maybe you can get yourself Aaron Jones if you're a believer, if you think he's going to, have another RB1 season in Green Bay. And I think that's what they can be useful for. I mean, obviously there's some polls that are like, I see polls that are like 90-10. All right, like disregard. Don't try to use those as an outline to craft a trade. But I think in situations like even 60-40, yeah, you're not going to get Aaron Jones for those 2 middling running backs, but that lets you know, all right, maybe, I try those 2 guys in a second, or maybe I try Mark Ingram in a first to try to get Aaron Jones. And I think that's what they can be useful for. So just one man's thought process on that. But it looks like, dude, it looks like we did it, man. Week 1
Nice.
in the books. We're in mid-season form. Let's face it. I mean, some of these teams out there look like they were in preseason form, but we're in mid-season form. And
my dynasty teams look like they're in preseason form.
Listen, you know what? They're revving up. They're getting ready for the push to the playoffs. Yeah, it's kind of like the Patriots of old, where they didn't really care about what happened in September. They figured out some things in October, and then they just November and December, January, they just steamrolled everybody. That's all you're doing, Bill. You're just working off the rust.
I'm not worried. It's just it was a rough one. You know what I mean?
I hear you, man. And look, you had a rough week. I had actually a really successful week, and I'm still looking at some teams like. I'm glad I got that week 1 win, but I'm still not projecting the championship in some leagues. So, it works both ways, whether you win or you lose. So, I think that's everything. We hit it mid-season form. I think we did good. And the best thing about our show, if you're watching us, if you're listening to us tomorrow when we come out, football is here, man. Like, we go to sleep, we wake up, football, man. Yeah, it's the Browns and the Bengals, and hey, but we're still going to be excited. Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield, Nick Chubb, AJ Green, Kareem Hunt, Odell Beckham. I mean, there's guys on both sides of the ball that on both teams, excuse me, that we are excited about. They're on our teams. They're probably going to be in our starting lineups. So yeah, it's exciting, man. I'm ready to go. And on that note, I thank you to everybody that was in the chat. We had Jerry Shea, FF Swirly, locking it down, giving us content. It was awesome. We saw other people in and out. We appreciate it. You guys can be doing anything on a Wednesday night, and you decided to kick it with us. So that's awesome. If you are listening to us or watching us on YouTube, excuse me, hit that bell and subscribe. Just search Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network. There's other stuff that comes out on that channel as well. So it's not just us, but if you like us, do that. If you're listening to us on podcast, thank you again. Hour and 5 minutes into this thing. You could be doing anything else again with an hour and 5 minutes. Even if you're sitting at your desk working, listening to a podcast, you could be listening to 1,000 other podcasts. So we appreciate that you're listening to us. If you're listening to us, you've probably subscribed, but hey, tell a friend, say, hey, these guys, they're average. You should listen to them. And leave a rate and review if you can on your podcast. That helps us out so much. It allows us to be seen by other people, but it also helps us to be able to see what you guys like, what you guys don't like, and craft this podcast to you guys. So, Bill, on that note, we out of here.
Late